It looks like Nassau as in the Bahamas, but he pronounces it Nassau, I believe. Just as a way of introduction, I'll let him sort of give you his credentials, but just as a reminder for those who haven't been here previously or may just need a refresher, the CAG requested in one of its first resolutions that EPA bring on board an independent technical advisor to look at the 10 contaminants of concern that are attributed to the DuPont Pompton Lakes Works site, okay? There are 10 COCs, contaminants of concern, that have historically, we've been following those along, and so the CAG says, well, how do we know those are really the full representative list? So the CAG passed a resolution saying we want review of this list, and so that's what has happened. The CAG identified a question. Here's that list of COCs, a full comprehensive list. EPA worked with the CAG and New Jersey DEP to identify the specific reports that could help the independent reviewer answer that question. So we came up with about 8 or so documents that could answer those questions. Actually, we came up with about 6 or 7 documents and said there's a couple of additional reports. If you feel that you need these reports, please let us know. And so they did. The reviewer did. Said I would like those reports, and so we provided them to the reviewer. Skeo Solutions is the national EPA contractor that provides the assistance for facilitation. Kirby Webster and Bill Lowe go through that contract, but also the independent reviews. Skeo selected Hagai and looked at his credentials, looked at the needs, and did the matchup. EPA had no role in this other than to provide the documents. We had no communications with the reviewer during the review process. We really wanted this to be an independent review. We did not review the fact sheet or the summary in its draft form. We did not make any changes or edits. We provided this to the CAG, or actually Skeo provided it to the CAG and EPA and New Jersey DEP on concurrent. So we got it cold, and at the last CAG meeting on September 14th, we said we will not be in a position tonight to respond to any recommendations or the results of the review. So we will not. We're going to listen to the guy, and we're going to certainly take questions, and we'll have more discussion at a later date. Let me ask the guy to come up, and if you would just give it just a couple of minutes about sort of what you do, like what your credentials are and who you are, and so I'll turn it over. Yeah.
My name is Hagai Nassau. I'm an environmental engineer with Skeo Solutions. I've been with Skeo for about 10 years, working on Superfund and other contaminated sites. And I'm giving the presentation, but there were a team of 3 of us who worked on this review. Myself and Kirby Webster, who you know, and also the senior reviewer was Terry Wadowski, who is an engineer who has about 15 years of experience working with communities with contaminated sites to help them understand the issues better.
I'll answer just just tell me when to advance.
All right. Quick agenda. What I'm going to be going over in this presentation. I'll give a quick introduction to tasks. Although I know you all have
very quick with that because they've already got that.
Yeah. Then a quick site background and a few slides of how chemicals in the environment and risk management. And then I'll get into tasks, review, groundwater sampling. Okay. TASK stands for Technical Assistance Services for Communities. It's an EPA-sponsored program. Usually is used for Superfund sites, but this community has been very fortunate to be able to get support from that program. There are various services that Skeo Solutions offers through the TASK program. We work on various sites around the country. This is actually an outdated map, but we work on sites throughout the country. I think around 50 or more sites so far. All right. As you all know, the site is located here. It's about 570 acres, operated from 1902 to 1994, and manufactured explosives and discharged waste. All right, real simplistically, what happens when chemicals spill? They can volatilize into air, they can stick to the soil, they can run off into surface water, they can percolate down through the soil and either float on top of the water table, sink under the aquifer, or dissolve into the groundwater. And lastly, they can degrade naturally. Okay, looking at the chemicals that have been found at this site, VOCs, volatile organic compounds. They tend to volatilize into the air, as the name implies. They percolate through the soil, and they can dissolve slowly into the groundwater, creating a plume like we have at this site. And they can also pool into crevices in the subsurface geology and remain there as a source of groundwater contamination. PAHs and PCBs are less likely to dissolve into water, and they tend to stick to soil particles. Metals, it depends on the site conditions. In general, more acidic conditions mobilize metals so they can move through the subsurface more readily. I think there are a variety of pH conditions at the site. And lastly, explosive compounds. It depends on the specific chemical and the soil conditions, and they are able to contaminate soil and groundwater. Real quick overview of how risk actually happens. You have to have contaminants. They have to be present at high enough concentrations. There has to be a pathway for exposure. And lastly, there have to be receptors exposed to that pathway. Different exposure pathways, the main ones being inhalation, ingestion, and skin contact. And when you want to manage the risk at site, you have to recognize that every site is different, and you need to make decisions based on the specific conditions at the site as well as specific risk factors. And when you, in order to manage the risk, you need to reduce contaminant concentrations at the point of exposure to acceptable levels. You can do it in different ways. You can remove the source by, for instance, digging up soil and hauling it off site. You can treat and contain contamination, for instance, through a pump and treat system like we have at this site. Lastly, you can eliminate exposure pathways, for instance, by fencing off a site or providing people with bottled water to drink instead of groundwater. All right, getting into the work that we did on the site. Like Dave mentioned, the question we were asked to answer is whether the 10 groundwater contaminants being tested for by DuPont are an appropriately comprehensive list of groundwater contaminants that are migrating from the site off of the site. And in order to do that, we reviewed these, I think, 8 documents. 2 of them were especially useful. The 1995 Comprehensive Groundwater Monitoring Plan that showed how DuPont went from all the contaminants that were sampled for and chose 11 to sample for. And then the 2010 remedial investigation report we found was really helpful in figuring out what contaminants are present in the soil at the site. All right, so looking at the 1995 Comprehensive Groundwater Monitoring Plan, started out with about 300 analytes that have been tested for in the 1980s and early 90s. DuPont looked at all these analytes and
just analyzing as chemicals? Or?
Right.
Okay.
Chemicals and also pH and
metals.
Yeah, metals and various things that you can test a groundwater sample for. And they narrowed it down to 34 that were above the New Jersey Class 2A standard.
And what is Class 2A?
A Class 2A aquifer is one that's a potential source of drinking water, which is how this area is categorized. So after they narrowed it down to 34, they looked at each of those more carefully and they eliminated 23 for various reasons, ranging from this is not caused by the site, this is due to background conditions, and they eliminated those 23 and got down to 11 contaminants of concern.
Did you concur with that elimination of 23?
For the most part, yeah. Yeah, I'll get into a little bit more. The 11 COCs they proposed to sample in 1995 were 10 VOCs plus lead. And then in 2000, they eliminated lead and got down to 10 current COCs.
Why was mercury not considered?
Mercury, off the top of my head, it's not one that we saw a problem with, not a sampling for. I'm not sure what their reasoning was. I can look at that again. It was, I don't want to speculate, but it's not one that we saw an issue with. So these were the 11. As you can see, 9 of the VOCs were made up of PCE, TCE, and its degradation products. And soil contaminants, we got this from the 2010 remedial investigation report. There are metals, lead, mercury, and copper being the primary COCs in soil. Also VOCs, PAHs, PCBs, and explosives. Only 3 of the samples exceeding New Jersey residential criteria for explosives. Our findings. We did not find any significant deficiencies in the processes used in 1995 to identify COCs based on what was known then. Groundwater analyses for many different chemicals we completed over 300. We found that adequate sampling and analyses of soil was conducted in 2010. And in general, care has been taken to analyze for appropriate chemicals based on what is known about what happened at the Pompton Lakes works. However, we do have recommendations that we are proposing presenting to the CAG.
You might want to point out that some of the summaries and recommendations are in your information package. There's a fact sheet at the front table, and for the CAG members, you have the information package. And then review notes that support that summary.
Yeah. So our recommendations were